Today, we take a look at some country punk rock bands. Check it. Punk rock has always been this sacred, rebellious lifestyle that sticks pretty black and white when it comes down to its raw nature, but when you get to the music aspect, it gets kind of skewed and breaks off into these various shades of gray. There are so many subgenres out there that punk itself is kind of a subgenre of rock. So one of the subgenres we're going to look of punk rock that doesn't get passed around and talked about a whole lot is country punk. Not to be confused with folk punk, which is an entirely different video for maybe another day. No, today we're talking about bands that I guess you'd consider play punk rock songs on acoustic guitars and banjos and violins and upright basses instead of the super fast way that we're used to. The attitude and emotion are still there, and how some of these artists are actually in punk rock bands themselves. And it's kind of their way to get out of the limelight for a while and do some of these projects as side projects or solo projects. So without further ado, let's jump into it. First up, we have to talk about Lucero. Lucero started out in Memphis, Tennessee back in 1998. Their first gig was across the street from the National Civil Rights Museum, the infamous Lorraine Motel where Martin Luther King Jr. was shot, and only 6 people showed up for that show. Since then, they went on to put out 11 albums and 1 live DVD, selling out countless shows worldwide. That's the thing about this band, is that unlike a lot of the mainstream, well, pretty much all of the mainstream country artists, they don't limit their music to just the United States. Really can't name a lot of country artists that decide they're going to go on a world tour and they're going to go outside of the U.S. They typically stay within the U.S. That's their demographic. That's their fan base. Lucero has been all over the place. It's more outlaw Western rock, more than anything in my opinion. I was first introduced to this band back at the Vans Warped Tour where they played. It's like a mix between Johnny Cash and Social Distortion, with a slide guitar, and sometimes horns thrown into the mix just to spice things up a little bit. It's a band that you have to give a listen to if you're down in the dumps, definitely for sure. Mike Ness. Speaking of Social Distortion, lead singer slash lead guitarist of Social Distortion, Mike Ness, started his side project in 1999, which is far different from his gritty punk rock heritage from Social Distortion. Cheating at Solitaire was his first record with a side project which paid homage to country artists that he grew up admiring. And on that record appeared the likes of Brian Setzer from the Stray Cats and the boss Bruce Springsteen himself. Under the same year, Mike Ness sprouted out a country punk rock album entitled Under the Influences that paid an even bigger homage to artists such as Hank Williams and Sonny Curtis, and then topped the end of the record off with a honky-tonk version of Social Distortion's Ball and Chain. It's one of my favorite covers of a Social Distortion song. It's just kind of weird that I like that song, even though it's actually by Social Distortion, I guess you'd say. It's like a cover of a cover. But that band actually got to peak on Billboard and even played Woodstock 1999, as well as toured on and off in between Social Distortion. It's kind of like Mike's side project. He wants to go and clear his head. He does this thing. You know, you can only do so much as a band, and if you're a musician as dedicated as Mike Ness is, you've kind of got to, you can write so many Social D songs, go write, put out a record, do a tour, come back. You have all this other stuff that you're like, this wasn't really a back burner for Social D, what am I going to do with it? I've got to put it out somehow, I've got to do something with it, and this is pretty much what he did with this stuff, is he did Mike Ness. Next up, we have Tumbledown, another artist that takes notes from Mike Ness. In this aspect, has to definitely be Mike Herrera of MxPx, who does pretty much the exact same thing, with his country punk rock side project known as Tumbledown. Tumbledown started in 2005, kind of, I guess you could say, but they didn't put her out a record for another couple years. But Mike Herrera went on record quoting, saying that their song "Late Again," which was off of their record which is off of MxPx's record Panic, said "Late Again" from the Panic album. From playing that song and the way that it was written and composed and the way it was arranged, that he wanted to do Tumbledown from then on. Just the feel of it, the vibe of it. He wanted to do something along those lines. Tumbledown cites influences from bands like Whiskey Town, Hank Williams, Johnny Cash, and Bill Monroe. Herrera also saying, I've always liked country. I think the first song I ever learned was Willie Nelson's On the Road Again. When I write punk songs, I do it all on acoustic anyway, so it was just a natural progression to write more folk-type songs when it came to Tumbledown. They released their first self-titled record in 2009. Like I said, it came a couple years later, which blends what I consider the comfortability of southern rock sound with like the punk rock attitude. Their follow-up album, Empty Bottle, dropped in 2010, and they toured on and off in between MxPx, similar to the way Social Distortion did. And they even picked up a few days on the 2014 Vans Warped Tour, similar to the way Lucero did. Old Man Markley. Now we're going down more of the bluegrass and folk route with Old Man Markley. They're a punk and bluegrass band started in 2007, signed to Fat Mike of NoFX's Fat Wreck Chords. This band is, like I said, more than bluegrass than country punk, but I really felt that I had to put them on this list. They're not together anymore. Sucks. I really wish they would get back together. But anyway, they fell on my radar when they covered Screeching Weasel's song, The Science of Myth. For them to cover such a powerful and old school punk song was kind of incredible and pretty awesome for me. Everything was super stripped. All the guitars were replaced with banjos and upright basses and 5 and 6 part harmonies. I think there was like 6 or 7 people in the band. Pretty amazing. Their single, For Better or For Worse, was pretty incredible too. It starts off 5, 6 part harmony a cappella, and it just breaks off into this bluegrass riff that just kicks off, and it kind of blows you away. Again, I said the band's not together anymore. They've been inactive since 2015. I'd really like to see a comeback from these guys. I've never got to see them live. It'd be amazing just to see them live once. Chuck Ragan. Now we're going back into the country punk territory. 1/4 of the band Hot Water Music. Chuck Ragan's music is similar to the aforementioned Mike Ness and Herrera, what they've done. Taking the idea of a punk rock heritage of Social Distortion and MxPx and Hot Water Music, and then taking a run with it and putting more of an outlaw, country rock spin on it, and doing kind of a side project with it is pretty much what Chuck Ragan has done with his side project. Growing up with a gospel and missionary singer mother, the influences of that project has definitely shined through on his music and his solo career. He grew up in Gainesville, Florida, growing up in the South. That also, I feel like with every single band that shines through, maybe the exception is like Newfound Glory. It's crazy they came from Florida and you'd never know it. Throughout his solo career, though, he's brought everyone from the rock, acoustic, folk, and punk world to collaborate. Everyone from members of the Foo Fighters, Social Distortion, Gaslight Anthem, the Wallflowers, and Blind Melon to help collaborate on his solo career. I think that kind of helps when you're starting out as a band. That was like my thing when I started a band, is that nobody knew who we were, so we tried to get kind of big names to help push us, and they're like, oh, because fans or people that didn't even know us, they'd be like, oh, well, this really cool band helped them out, so maybe they're really cool because this is a really cool band that helped them out for no reason. There has to be a reason. The biggest claim to fame, though, wasn't necessarily a solo project. Solo tour, which was dubbed the Revival Tour. The Revival Tour is really fucking cool, which is a conceptual idea he started in 2005, which brought together punk, alternative country, and folk performers together on several events into a grassroots type fashion festival type. The first show saw the likes of members from Against Me and Lawrence Arms and Frank Turner, and it gained steam in the later years, bringing members from Lucero, Old Man Markley, and Flogging Molly together. Also, again, Frank Turner and the guys from Lawrence Arms Against Me, they all came together, and it would be kind of a thing where every single show, a member from this band would come up and play bass, and then the drummer from this band would come up and play drums, and then the guitar player from this band would whatever, and if they knew how to play harmonica, they would come up, or if they would guest spot on vocals or something. And it just so happened that say this person lived in this town and they were off on tour, they would come in and sing for the whole night or whatever. It would be one of those type deals. It was kind of a cool thing. It's not like they would tour with him or whatever. It would just be maybe a couple nights here and there, or just within the area. Kind of a cool concept, I think. Next up is Frank Turner. From metal to punk to post-core to hardcore, Frank Turner's life changed when someone gave him Bruce Springsteen's Nebraska. He said that when he listened to that, it changed and shaped who he was today, stating that was a really big moment for me, hearing that record in terms of a turnaround for my music career from hardcore punk bands to what I'm doing now. He was pretty much in metal and hardcore and all that stuff, and then listening to The Boss, he really, they really invigorated him to do singer-songwriter type stuff. His first solo album was dropped in 2005, and he's put out 8 records since then. Pretty amazing. I just got turned on to Frank Turner not too long ago. Jarrett Reddick from Bowling for Soup really turned me on to listening to Frank Turner, so shout out to Jarrett, shout out to Frank Turner. Next up is the Front Bottoms. This is another band I was recently just turned on to, with a lot more folk punk vibe to them. The Front Bottoms are a band that have definitely showed up under a lot more modern pop punk fans' radar in the recent years because they're more of a more recent band. A lot of these bands, you see they started out like 1989 or the early 90s, and I mean, there's a couple more on the list that started out like 73 or something. But this band started in 2006 and have had 2 records out before their self-titled album in 2011, which kind of projected them forward, getting them signed to Bar None Records. They've been compared in the punk rock community to the likes of bands like Modern Baseball and Joyce Manor, while still having like a folk acoustic-y vibe, that kind of sound, still having like I don't even know, you'd have to listen to them, but they still have that country rock kind of vibe. It's so weird. I can't explain it. They're a band that jumped from like the little unknown like indie label, and then just skyrocketed overnight, being signed to Fuel by Ramen, who currently has the likes of 21 Pilots, A Day to Remember, and Paramore, the list goes on, signed to them. So it's kind of crazy that they, Fuel by Ramen took them on and kind of did that for them. Next up is Larry and His Flask. The band name alone should kind of say it for you, is a self-styled post-Americana band from Bend, Oregon, who have supported the likes in the past of Frank Turner, Strung Out, Flogging Molly, Streetlight Manifesto, and even played cross-country stints on the band's Warped Tour. Even though they've played like these big shows and have supported these big bands in the past, that they have stated, we play a lot of street corners busking if we're very low on gas money. So they can go from playing a giant venue, supporting a giant act. We're on tour and we didn't make that much tonight. The promoter screwed us over. We've got to busk on the street corner for money. We're going to do that tonight because we've got to make some money to get to the next show tomorrow. The band is definitely down that avenue of folk punk meets bluegrass territory. They've got accordion, they got a fiddle, they got banjo thrown in there, and they write about stuff that a lot of punk bands write about, a lot of pop punk bands write about: life on the road, girls, drinking, growing up in a shitty town, and getting into trouble like young punks. The band has more members than Slipknot. Well, it has had more members than Slipknot at one point, 11 to be exact, for a short time, but then cut that in half and now have a total of 6. And you're wondering which member in the band is Larry? And, well, the answer is none of them. Larry comes from a fictional character that the members Jamin, I don't know how, Jamin, I don't know how you want to pronounce that, and Jess Marshall came up with around the time the band started. Those two started the band, and it was kind of a joke, so I guess that kind of started as the band's name. Nobody in the band is named Larry. But since the band began in 2006, Larry and His Flask has put out 7 LPs and 2 EPs and continues to put out albums to this day. They actually put out one in 2019. It's on Spotify. You can check it out right now. Tim's Timebomb, I've been saying it wrong the whole time. Another side project, yes, kinda. Tim Armstrong from Rancid dips his toes pretty much all over every genre. He's in everything. Primarily in punk rock. Everyone pretty much knows Tim Armstrong as the front man songwriter from Rancid. He also dips his feet in hip hop as the singer, songwriter, main guy in the Transplants with Travis Barker from Blink-182, as well as going down the road of ska in the past and being the lead singer, frontman, songwriter from the band Operation Ivy. He's also written and produced albums in the past. He did Pink's album. I think he did an album with Avril Lavigne. Tim's Timebomb takes the path of the outlaw countryman, combined with soul and punk rock, and takes it to a mixture of like cover songs, originals, and includes tracks from Tim's musical film projects, as well as adds various supporting musicians, covering everyone from Bryan Adams' Summer '69 to Elton John's Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting, as well as his own Rancid tunes. He covers everything from Hyena to As Wicked. This project is pretty comprehensive. It has over 30 songs in which it was released 3 different records between 2013 and 2014 via Pirate Press Records. I think they still have it. You can get it in CD, vinyl, and I'm not 100% sure, but I think you can stream it as well. I don't know, maybe you want to check that out. The Reverend Horn Heat is the stage name for Dallas, Texas native Jim Heath, for a psychobilly trio which was formed in 1986. I said we'd be going back a little bit on some of these ones. Reverend Horn Heat has influences from the 50s and 60s surf, big band, and jazz era, 70s punk and rock era combined with their own southern rock charm. That's what I think anyway. And that's what Wikipedia says, and their bio says, so all of this has to be right. The band definitely gives off that country punk rock vibe, even going as far as being signed by Victory Records in 2012, which is a very well-known punk rock and pop-punk record label, and they've put out 2 full-length records from the band, so they have faith in the Reverend, and they're still signed to the record label to this day. So, last but not least is Hank Williams III. Yes, we're talking about Hank Williams from that same bloodline. Sheldon Hank Williams spent his early years playing in punk bands, unlike his grandpap and his dad before him, who played in country and folk bands. We're talking about the same Hank Williams again. Throughout much of the 80s and 90s, he played drums in a lot of hardcore and punk bands throughout the scene, before releasing his first solo record in 1999 entitled Rising Outlaw. The sets from his early years were kind of weird. They were what they described as Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, where like one set's format would be very much acoustic, very much like his grandpap and like his dad, very countryist. And then another set would be very hardcore, very punk, very metal, very shit getting broken, which later became what he turned into a metal band known as Assjack. Assjack was produced and sounded more metalcore and combined with psychobilly and hardcore punk. Two different elements, and he also separated those after a while as well, where he would tour with Assjack, and then he would also tour with singer-songwriter type thing, and then he would also do a tour where he would just kind of put them together, and he would tour like that as well, the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde thing. Hank III is definitely something worth listening to, as well as Assjack. It's a totally different world. It's the best of everything metal, punk, and country combined in one. It's something that I am 100% sure, not 100% sure, I'm never 100% sure of anything, that all the elitists can agree, someone from the metal world, from the punk world, from the country world can all come together and kind of, in harmony, agree upon. It's kind of like Motorhead, you know, that you can all agree upon. Everybody likes Motorhead, no matter what world you come from. Everyone likes that band. Anyways, guys, that's my list. There's a ton of other bands that I didn't cover, and they're kind of obscure, kind of like the front bottoms that I kind of touched on. But there's bands like the old 97s, which I love, and Aaron West and the Roaring 20s, which is a kind of new one, which is kind of, again, like the front bottoms. But they're kind of more folky. There's other bands like the Lumineers, which, you know, they also blew up, and other bands like Mumford & Sons, which you're going more down that that newgrass and that folk territory. I think I might do another video on this and bands more similar to that, down that road, that singer-songwriter indie rock. Yeah, I guess that's considered indie rock territory. I tried to veer more down the road to go straight down the road towards punk and not veer at all. And sometimes what happened, some point during this video, I looked down at my phone or something, and looked up, and I veered too far to the right, and I was off the road. But then, I think towards the end, steered myself right back onto the road, and we were okay. I think we were fine towards the end. But anyway, let me know down below if you liked or knew of any of these bands at all, or if I should do a part 2. With that, we're just going to roll the outro later and all that stuff.